12, 16. She accounted for at least 16 points, and defensively, potentially prevented 6 points by, with her steals. So to me, that is quintessential point guard play right there. Any points you get, is a bonus. But what she did with the assist to turnover ratio and her defense, she's got to be out there.
Exactly. So we're 8 games. We're 9 games in. The Lady Buckeyes are 6-3 overall. As I mentioned, they're on a 3-game win streak. And Palo Alto, California, and the Stanford Cardinal coming up Sunday, 8:30 p.m. I'm trying to look. Right now they're saying it's just going to be on the Pac-12 network, so we're probably not going to be able to see that. And oddly enough, I'm not seeing, what is Stanford ranked right now?
Stanford is currently ranked that's a good question, number 1 in both polls.
Oh, that's right, because of the... Yeah, that's exactly right, because of the loss the week before, prior to the Buckeyes beating Louisville, they had slid up. So another really good opportunity as we move on to the next game for our topics. Anything other than UConn and Louisville that can prepare this team for number 1 Stanford?
I think that the fact is we give UConn and Louisville all the credit because they're the names and stuff. But if you look at the RPI rankings right now, Ohio State has the second hardest schedule in the country right now. They've done what they can to prepare for it. You can't play much harder competition.
And I'll throw something else out there, and I probably won't articulate it as well as I could, but given that I'm used to writing and not speaking, I think having that Radford game in between these 2 games was so critical because it gave them a chance to come down from the Louisville game. And they played okay against Radford. They shot well from the free throw line, hit about half their shots. So I think they played okay. But I think having that game in between will help get their focus back up for Stanford, and they're getting some national recognition. They're getting some votes in the polls. So I know a lot of coaches don't like to stress that, but they're catching people's eyes and getting some attention. So that hopefully will help you stay focused too.
Yeah, and this is actually something I was talking about with my wife after the Louisville game. We comment because she played softball, had scholarship offers for that, so she's used to kind of high level sports here. But we were talking about how it's such a young team, and one of the things she made is they may not know yet just how big a game like Louisville is.
Yeah, that's
it could very well be.
Point.
And we may not know till later on how big that is,
Yeah. That said, we just commented on how Stanford had slid up to number 1 because another team had lost. Well, that team that lost 2 weeks ago was Oregon, and the team that beat it was the Louisville team that we turned around and beat.
Yeah, right. A few days before. So it's like that game, having Radford after Louisville before Stanford. I'm sure Louisville wishes they had a team that wasn't going to punch them in the mouth, much like the Buckeyes did in that game. And it's really interesting that when you look at I'm looking at the Stanford women's schedule: Eastern Washington, San Francisco, Northern Colorado, Gonzaga, Buffalo. Their last 3 have been California Baptist, number 18 Syracuse, which they handled rather easily, 77-59. And then the always tough Mississippi State at number 10 right now. They won 67-62. So they might, but they haven't played for 2 weeks. So they might come into this game a little bit sluggish Sunday night and really need to lean on, probably one of the better players in America right now to get things to happen.
Yeah, well, and as you said, they've had a little bit of time off, which I'm never a huge fan of, especially this early in the season. But we're kind of in that same spot that Radford was for Ohio State, being that sandwich game between two ranked teams. Mississippi State was 10th, and coming up next for Stanford is 23rd Tennessee. And Tennessee isn't who they used to be, but that name still means something and gets some attention, when you see that coming up on the schedule. So we may actually have an interesting spot here.
Well, excuse my cough. I think the big thing here is that they've had their layoff. They may be a little bit rusty. I think if Ohio State can come out there early, punch them in the mouth, get a nice little lead, catch them off guard, keep the crowd out of it, because they usually get a good crowd out there, and then withstand that one rally, that they're going to have in the second half, they can go out there and win this game.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think, as this team showed, they can beat the top teams now. They can hang with UConn. They can beat Louisville. There's nothing that says we can't take Stanford on and take them out. I mean, this is going to be harder because I think Stanford's better than both Louisville and UConn, and the bigger problem is it's on the road.
Yeah, that's the big thing. It's a road environment. So that's why I'm thinking, Stanford's going to be a little bit rusty, having not played for a couple weeks. They may not come out sharp. So if we can punch them in the mouth early and keep the crowd out of it, take away that advantage, that's going to be huge. I'm not saying that they can, match them bucket for bucket early and not worry about the crowd, because they certainly are capable. But this is one of those games, get at them early. Get at them early when you can, because they're going to be rusty. I just can't see them not being rusty, not having played for 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and it's interesting that because Tara Vanderveer has always been one of my favorite people, the former Buckeye coach, I've always kind of secretly desired for her to decide to come back home, after her career at Stanford. Looking at their roster and the way they've played this year, this is probably a really good matchup for the young Buckeyes because she's smaller. Tara is a lot smaller than she's normally been in the past. She doesn't have any true centers on her roster at this time, and she plays guard heavily. And I think this plays into Kevin McGuff's mentality and the way he's coaching up his guards right now.
Yeah, depth is going to win this game. Depth is going to be key.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to be another game where it's unexpected. Would I put money on Ohio State in this game? Probably not. Would I bet on them to cover the spread? Yeah, probably good chance.
What is the line on this game?
Good luck finding Vegas lines on women's basketball this far out.
Yeah.
I actually
I don't
think I
think
saw somebody
State.
tweet that. I think
the line or that they don't have them very often.
Oh,
I don't think they get blown out.
Yeah, I'm calling this probably, if I had to be honest, I'd say 10, 7 to 10 points, somewhere in there, much like the UConn game was. And honestly, down the stretch, if they're within striking distance, I can't really see, can't see any reason why they wouldn't be able to pull off the upset again.
Yeah, I would say, if I was Vegas, I'd put this in a 10 to 12 point spread, because it is the number one team playing at home against an unranked team that's lost 3 times. But Ohio State has the talent; they can go in there and win this game. I think they can do it, and I'm not going to call for the upset, but I will not be shocked at all if they win this game the way they're playing right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And going back to the point I made earlier, they may be young enough that the road environment isn't as big of a deal, because they aren't expected to win this game. There's not a whole lot of pressure on them, frankly.
And some of these girls have played in big games in high school. I know playing in front of 1,500 people in a high school game is a lot different than playing in front of 6, 7, 8,000 people in college. But a lot of these girls on this Ohio State roster are used to playing in big games and big crowds.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, the recruits you get at Ohio State are used to playing for championships.
Yeah, and that's why I'll go back to my statement about this class of freshmen and really, a couple of the sophomores. I think it's been an opportunity for him to kind of reset the status, so to speak, of players and be able to spread things, spread the wealth, so to speak. Um, the Lady Buckeyes take on number one Stanford. They travel to Palo Alto Sunday. That's an 8:30 tip. You can find that on the TuneIn app, which I believe is probably going to be 610 W, or not 610, but 1460 The Fan on the TuneIn app. And if you're fortunate enough to get the Pac-12 networks, we encourage you to take them. And I might actually, now that I think about it, that might actually be on the higher channels on local television. They're actually going to stay on the West Coast, because then they travel to Sacramento for a Tuesday matchup against Sacramento State, and this really presents an interesting matchup for the Lady Buckeyes, just because of the fact that Sacramento State is one of those teams that does a lot of subbing every so many minutes, and they try to do catch and run and shooting the ball.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. It's a good thing they're going to stay out there. That's probably the smartest thing to do.
Yeah, the jet lag would probably be horrible.
Right, yeah. Then they get to come home, have a little bit of Christmas break, and then it's Big Ten time.
Yeah, it's interesting if you've been following some of the Big Ten action. They kick off conference schedule Saturday, December 28th at home. That game is at St. John Arena, so we encourage you to get your tickets and pack St. John Arena and make it loud every chance, every opportunity you get. I believe that's the only time they're playing at St. John Arena. I'm scrolling through the schedule, and I think that
that's their only one this season.
And then the really interesting part about maybe what the Big Ten Network executives' thought process was around what the Buckeyes were going to be like this year with the almost number one recruiting class. They're on TV on every game, at least BTN or BTN Plus, a couple ESPNs, for every game except for game number 2 with Minnesota. And that's really, really interesting when you consider the last 2 years they haven't actually been on BTN all that much on the regular women's broadcasting schedule.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a sign of respect. I think it's also a sign, and I've complained about this for years, that BTN doesn't take full advantage of what it can do and actually really showcase enough sports. There's way too many shows on there with talking and stuff. Put games on.
Absolutely. So we've talked about this a bunch of times, Charles, Scott, and I, about having our own little segments. Scott, do you have a Scott's rant for this episode?
Well, I don't know if I have a rant. I think my comments about young Madison, I think will suffice about how important that was and how proud I was of her for hitting those free throws. I don't necessarily have a rant this time. I'm just going to stand by those comments earlier.
That's awesome. Charles, from time to time we have Charles' Corner. It could be things that the Buckeyes need to improve upon, or Charles always seems to pick the right topics. You got anything for us this time?
Well, I mean, so I think last time I pointed out the issues with free throw shooting. They seem to have listened to that or something. I don't know. The basketball gods listened or whatever, but that's really improved the past couple games. They've shot that really well. Rebounding, as we talked about, namely the offensive boards, are still a problem. Getting out rebounded by Louisville on the offensive boards, not great, especially when I think you get out rebounded. Let me check. 15-3 on the offense. In terms of offensive boards, not good to see. But even Radford, beat us on the offensive boards closer that time, 10-7, but still you know, we gotta that's where we gotta pick this up. I mean, the team shoots pretty well. They've been shooting around 50%. So any offensive board missed is almost a guaranteed 2 points you've given